While the world was watching gold break records, something unusual happened in the silver market. Russia quietly committed over $500 million to precious metals purchases. Then, just months later, the United States made a move it hadn't made in decades, adding silver to its critical minerals list and launching a $12 billion strategic reserve. Two superpowers, one industrial metal, and a global supply chain that's been running deficits for 5 straight years. What do governments know that most investors are missing? Let's examine the data. To understand what's happening now, we need to look at where the silver market stands today. And the numbers tell a compelling story. According to the Silver Institute's World Silver Survey 2025, the global silver market has experienced its 5th consecutive year of supply deficits. In 2025 alone, the shortfall reached approximately 118 million ounces. To put that in perspective, since 2021, cumulative deficits have totaled roughly 820 million ounces. That's nearly 25,500 metric tons of silver where demand exceeded supply. The USGS Mineral Commodity Summaries 2025 reports that world silver mine production actually decreased in 2024, falling to approximately 25,000 metric tons from 25,500 tons in 2023. Meanwhile, consumption has been climbing steadily. So what's driving this demand? The answer represents a fundamental shift in silver's role in the global economy. In 2024, industrial applications accounted for approximately 59% of total silver consumption, a dramatic change from previous decades when investment demand and jewelry dominated. We're talking about photovoltaic solar panels, electric vehicle components, 5G infrastructure, semiconductors, medical devices, and water purification systems. Let me break down the U.S. consumption pattern from the USGS data for 2024. Physical investment, bars, 30%, electrical and electronics, 29%, coins and metals, 12%, photovoltaics, 12%, jewelry and silverware, 6%, brazing and solder, 4%, other industrial uses, 7%. Notice something? Add up the industrial categories, and you're looking at well over half of total demand. This isn't your grandfather's silver market anymore. And the price? Silver averaged $27.70 per troy ounce in 2024, an 18% increase from 2023's average of $23.54. By October 2024, prices had spiked to $34.60 per ounce, and in 2025, silver has continued its ascent, with some reports showing peaks above $54 per ounce by year's end. That's the backdrop. Now let's examine what Russia has been doing. Russia's involvement in the silver market operates on 3 levels: reserves, production, and strategic accumulation. Let's examine each with official data. According to the USGS 2025 Critical Minerals Report, Russia holds approximately 92,000 metric tons in identified silver reserves. That places Russia second globally, behind only Peru's 140,000 metric tons. To contextualize that figure, Russia controls about 14% of the world's known silver reserves, totaling approximately 640,000 metric tons. In 2024, Russia produced an estimated 1,200 metric tons of silver, according to USGS data. That's down slightly from 1,240 metric tons in 2023, but Russia remains among the top 10 global producers. Silver production in Russia primarily comes as a byproduct from polymetallic ore deposits, meaning it's extracted alongside copper, lead, zinc, and gold. Key Russian silver producers include operations in the Trans-Baikal territory, the Far East, and other mineral-rich regions. The country has been actively exploring and developing new deposits. Here's where the story gets interesting. On September 30th, 2024, the Russian government made a significant announcement as part of its draft federal budget for 2025-2027. Russia allocated 51.5 billion rubles, approximately 535 to 538 million for precious metals purchases over the 3-year period. While the announcement mentioned precious metals broadly, multiple financial news outlets, including Kitco News, Forbes, and various commodity trading publications, reported that this included silver. This marked a notable policy change, as central banks have traditionally focused almost exclusively on gold for reserve holdings. Then, in October 2025, Russia's Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment released data showing that Russian silver reserves grew by over 4,000 tons during 2025, according to a TASS report. This represents one of the largest single-year increases in Russian silver reserves in recent history. The ministry specifically highlighted several major discoveries and reassessments. The Unkar deposit in the Trans-Baikal territory, nearly 700 tons of on-balance silver reserves, plus an additional 295.7 tons of off-balance reserves. Additional exploration at the Noyon Tologoy deposit, adding 1,170 tons. Reassessment of the Pashanka deposit, adding 1,290 tons. Russia also announced that businesses plan to allocate 36.2 billion rubles, approximately 454 million, for silver exploration in 2025, up from 29 billion rubles in 2024. The federal government contributed an additional 2.3 billion rubles over 3 years to support early-stage geological exploration. Russia is simultaneously 1. Increasing domestic exploration and reserve identification. 2. Allocating substantial government funds for precious metals purchases. 3. Expanding its geological database of silver resources. This coordinated approach suggests silver has become a strategic priority at the highest levels of Russian economic policy. Whether this is for monetary diversification, industrial stockpiling, or geopolitical positioning remains a matter of analysis, but the scale and coordination of these efforts is indisputable. Now let's turn to the United States, which has undertaken its most comprehensive critical minerals policy overhaul in decades. On November 7, 2025, the U.S. Geological Survey released its finalized 2025 list of critical minerals, the third such list since the program began under a 2017 executive order. This update added 10 new minerals to the critical list: boron, copper, lead, metallurgical coal, phosphate, potash, rhenium, silicon, silver, uranium. According to USGS Director Ned Mamula, this is the most comprehensive science-based assessment yet of the minerals our nation relies on. Critical minerals underpin industries worth trillions of dollars, and import dependence puts key sectors at risk. Why was silver added? The USGS methodology evaluates two primary factors: supply risk and economic importance. For silver, the data was compelling. Supply risk. In 2024, the United States was approximately 64% net import reliant for silver, according to USGS statistics. The U.S. produced roughly 100 metric tons domestically, but imported approximately 4,200 metric tons to meet demand. Primary import sources were Mexico, 44%, Canada, 17%, Republic of Korea, 5%, and Poland, 5%. Economic importance. Silver's role in electrical and electronics manufacturing, photovoltaic solar panels, and emerging technologies made it strategically significant. The critical minerals designation means silver now qualifies for expedited permitting, federal research funding, and inclusion in strategic reserves. On February 2, 2026, President Trump signed an executive order creating the U.S. Strategic Critical Minerals Reserve, dubbed Project Vault. The announcement, made in an Oval Office ceremony attended by cabinet members and industry leaders, including GM CEO Mary Barra, marked a historic commitment to mineral security. The financial structure, as detailed by the Export-Import Bank: $10 billion direct loan from the U.S. Export-Import Bank, the largest in the agency's 92-year history, $2 billion in private sector financing, structured as an independently governed public-private partnership. According to CSIS analysis, Project Vault will stockpile all 60 minerals on the critical list, including silver. Unlike the traditional national defense stockpile established in 1939 for military needs, Project Vault is designed as an economic security mechanism for civilian industries. The model works like this. Manufacturers make long-term commitments and pay fees in exchange for guaranteed access to critical materials during supply disruptions. They cover storage costs and interest, effectively pre-funding supply certainty rather than paying volatile spot prices during crises. The stockpile allows companies to withdraw materials annually for normal use, provided they replenish to maintain committed levels, ensuring inventory rotation. Initial participants include major manufacturers: Clarios, GE Vernova, Western Digital, and Boeing, with suppliers including Hartree Partners, Mercuria Americas, and Traxys. But the policy response didn't stop there. On January 14, 2026, President Trump signed a proclamation following a Commerce Department Section 232 investigation into processed critical minerals and their derivative products. The investigation's key findings were stark. The U.S. was 100% net import reliant for 12 critical minerals. The U.S. was 50% or greater net import reliant for another 29 critical minerals. Even where the U.S. has domestic mining capacity, like rare earth elements, lack of processing capacity creates downstream dependence. Critical minerals underpin all 16 critical infrastructure sectors. Supply disruptions pose material risks to defense, aerospace, telecommunications, and transportation. The proclamation directs the Commerce Secretary and U.S. Trade Representative to negotiate agreements with trading partners to secure supply chains, with the potential for tariffs or minimum import prices if satisfactory agreements aren't reached within 180 days. The U.S. is also moving to expand domestic capacity. According to USGS data, in 2024, the U.S. had 4 primary silver mines, 31 operations producing silver as a byproduct or co-product, 24 refiners producing commercial-grade silver, production across 12 states with Alaska and Idaho leading. The Rochester mine in Nevada was expanding operations, and the Lucky Friday mine in Idaho resumed production in January 2024 after a fire in August 2023. With the critical minerals designation, additional projects may receive expedited permitting and financing support. Now let's examine how these policy shifts might reshape global silver supply chains. This section analyzes structural factors observable in the current market. According to USGS and Silver Institute data, global silver production is heavily concentrated. Mexico, the world's leading producer, contributing approximately 6,300 metric tons in 2024. China, second largest, producing about 3,300 metric tons. Peru, third, with approximately 3,100 metric tons. Bolivia, Chile, Australia, Russia, Poland, each contributing 1,300 metric tons. Latin American countries collectively supply over half of global silver output. This geographic concentration creates inherent supply chain vulnerability. Political instability, regulatory changes, or labor disputes in any of these regions can impact global supply. Here's a critical distinction often overlooked. Mining capacity doesn't equal supply security. The U.S. Section 232 investigation revealed that America is the second largest producer of mined, unprocessed rare earth oxides globally, yet still requires exporting those materials for refining before re-importing them for domestic use. The same dynamic applies to silver. Even with increased domestic mining, without adequate refining and processing infrastructure, the U.S. remains dependent on foreign processing capacity. This is why the critical minerals policy emphasizes not just mining, but complete supply chain development. Several demand sectors show strong growth trajectories. Photovoltaics. Silver Institute data indicates solar panels consumed approximately 196 million troy ounces globally in 2024, about 17% of total silver demand, up from just 5% in 2014. As countries pursue renewable energy targets, this sector continues expanding despite efforts to reduce silver content per panel. Electric vehicles. EVs use significantly more silver than internal combustion vehicles due to electrical systems, battery connections, and power electronics. As EV adoption accelerates globally, this demand vector grows proportionally. 5G infrastructure. Silver's superior electrical conductivity makes it essential for 5G network equipment, which requires denser, more efficient signal transmission than previous generations. Medical applications. Silver's antimicrobial properties drive growing use in medical devices, wound dressings, and hospital equipment, a sector that gained prominence during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. When major economies simultaneously designate a commodity as critical and establish strategic reserves, economists observe what's called a competitive stockpiling dynamic. This occurs when countries prioritize securing supply for national objectives, potentially reducing market liquidity and increasing price volatility. Consider the sequence. Russia announces precious metals purchases in September 2024. The U.S. adds silver to its critical list in November 2025. The U.S. launches a $12 billion stockpile program in February 2026. If other nations, particularly China, Japan, South Korea, or EU members, adopt similar policies, the cumulative impact on available supply could be substantial. It's important to understand supply-side inertia. Bringing new silver production online takes years. Exploration, 2 to 5 years. Feasibility studies and permitting, 2 to 5 years. Mine construction, 2 to 4 years. Ramp up to full production, 1-2 years. This means new supply cannot quickly respond to policy-driven demand increases. The market must rely on existing production, recycling, which provided approximately 1,200 tons or 19% of U.S. apparent consumption in 2024, and inventory drawdowns. Higher prices historically drive innovation in material efficiency. The solar industry has already made significant progress reducing silver content through thinner silver paste applications, copper replacement in certain components, alternative conductor materials. However, silver's unique combination of electrical conductivity, thermal conductivity, and reflectivity makes complete substitution difficult in many applications. Some substitution is possible. Wholesale replacement is not, at least not with current technology. Let's examine potential implications of these developments. This is analytical interpretation based on observable factors, not financial forecasting. If Russia continues adding reserves at the 2025 pace, 4,000 plus tons annually, and if the U.S. Project Vault begins acquiring materials for its stockpile, these actions could absorb significant quantities that would otherwise serve commercial markets. Combined with 5 consecutive years of supply deficits, this structural change could maintain upward price pressure, though actual price movements depend on numerous variables, including recycling rates, demand fluctuations, and mining output. Russia's move towards central bank precious metals purchases that explicitly include silver may establish a precedent other nations follow. Historically, central banks have treated gold as the primary monetary metal for reserves. If silver gains acceptance as a legitimate reserve asset, even as a secondary holding, this could represent a new source of sustained demand from entities with deep resources and long-time horizons. Several factors make this plausible. Silver's industrial utility provides fundamental demand floor. Lower price point than gold allows larger volume accumulation. Diversification benefits for reserve portfolios. Geopolitical considerations regarding dollar-denominated assets. However, this remains speculative until other central banks make explicit announcements. The U.S. critical minerals policy explicitly prioritizes reducing dependence on foreign-controlled supply chains, with particular focus on minerals where China dominates processing. If similar policies emerge in Europe, Japan, or other allied economies, the global silver market could fragment into regional supply blocks. This fragmentation might manifest as preferential trade agreements among allied nations, tariffs or quotas on imports from certain countries, export restrictions from producing nations seeking to secure domestic supply, increased price differentials between regional markets. Such fragmentation typically reduces market efficiency and increases volatility, as supply cannot flow freely to where demand is highest. Traditionally, silver investment demand has been highly price elastic, rising when prices increase, momentum buying, and falling when prices drop. However, if silver gains recognition as a strategic industrial commodity rather than primarily a precious metal, investment behavior may change. Institutional investors and commodity funds might approach silver more like copper or lithium, evaluating long-term supply-demand fundamentals and industrial growth trends rather than monetary factors or inflation hedging. This could reduce volatility in some respects while increasing correlation with industrial metals. Higher, more stable prices incentivize both supply-side and demand-side innovation. Supply-side, projects previously uneconomic at 20-25 Oz silver become viable at 30-35 plug Oz. This includes lower-grade deposits, more complex metallurgy, and previously marginal operations. However, the multi-year development timeline means the supply response lags significantly. Demand side, industries consuming large quantities have strong incentives to reduce silver intensity. We've already seen this in photovoltaics, where silver content per watt has decreased substantially. Continued innovation could moderate demand growth even as installations increase. Nations controlling significant silver reserves and production capacity may gain geopolitical leverage, particularly as renewable energy and advanced technology deployment accelerates. This is analogous to how rare earth element supply has become a strategic consideration in U.S.-China relations. Mexico, as the world's largest producer, could theoretically use export controls as policy tools, though this would conflict with USMCA trade agreement commitments. Similarly, if tensions escalate, major producers might face pressure to align their export policies with geopolitical blocs. At higher price levels, silver recycling becomes increasingly economical. Electronic waste, e-waste, contains significant silver content. Estimates suggest smartphones, computers, and other devices collectively contain substantial quantities. Enhanced recycling infrastructure could become a meaningful secondary supply source, though building this capacity requires investment and regulatory frameworks for e-waste collection and processing. So, where does this leave us? The facts are unambiguous. Russia has expanded its silver reserves by over 4,000 tons in 2025 and committed over $500 million to precious metals purchases. The United States has designated silver as a critical mineral for the first time and allocated $12 billion for a strategic stockpile. Global silver markets have experienced 5 consecutive years of supply deficits. Industrial demand, driven by solar energy, electric vehicles, and electronics, now dominates consumption patterns. These developments represent a fundamental reframing of silver's strategic importance. For decades, silver occupied an awkward middle ground, too industrial to be purely monetary, too precious to be treated like base metals. That ambiguity is resolving. Governments now view silver as they view lithium, cobalt, rare earths, and other critical materials, essential to economic security, technological competitiveness, and the clean energy transition. This policy recognition has tangible consequences: expedited permitting, government financing, strategic reserves, and trade protections. The question isn't whether silver matters strategically. That debate is settled. The questions now are, how quickly will supply respond to these new incentives? Will other nations follow Russia and America's lead in stockpiling? Can technological innovation moderate demand growth? And will regional supply chains fragment along geopolitical lines? The data provides the foundation for understanding these questions. How the market, industry, and policymakers respond will shape the next chapter of silver's story, one driven less by investment trends or monetary policy and more by solar panels, electric vehicle charging stations, and 5G networks. This is silver's industrial era, and we're watching it unfold in real time